Welcome to the Emancipated Mind Show. My name is Anneshia Freeman. I'm also known as the locksmith because I make keys for locks in the mind. I'm an award-winning master-level therapist, and I also have an MBA. I'm the creator of a cognitive restructuring program entitled The Lies That Bind. This show exposes and challenges dysfunctional unconscious beliefs that cause people to engage in self-defeating behaviors repeatedly despite the consequences. This show is streamed live via Facebook and YouTube every Thursday from 7 o'clock p.m. to 7:45 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Again, welcome to the Emancipated Mind Show. Hello, my name is Anneshia Freeman. I'm also known as the locksmith because I make keys for locks in the mind. Welcome to episode 27 of the Emancipated Mind Show. This is a show that addresses the root causes of many problems that people face in their lives. Problems such as self-sabotage, procrastination, people-pleasing, dysfunctional relationships, perfectionism, addictions, low self-esteem, codependency, unrealistic expectations. And today I'm focusing on poor leadership. So last week during episode 26 and during episode 27 today and the next several weeks, I'm going to be talking about dysfunctional unconscious beliefs that negatively impact the bottom line at companies, organizations, and for cities, for municipalities. And so today the topic is improving the bottom line by updating infrastructure. Now, this show usually airs live, but as I said last week, during the next several weeks, I'm going to be going live certain weeks, and other weeks I will pre-record the show. This is one of the weeks that I'm pre-recording the show due to a scheduling conflict. I didn't want to cancel any episodes, so some weeks I'm going to pre-record the show. So as I stated, and as it said in the introduction, I'm a master's level therapist. I also have a master's in business administration. So I'm a therapist, but I'm also a consultant, and I do trainings for companies, organizations, and cities. So today's topic, improving the bottom line by updating infrastructure, is actually from one of my podcasts. So I have several podcast series that are out. And today I'm going to show a short excerpt from one of my podcasts. Now, my podcasts range in time in length from 15 minutes to 25 or 30 minutes. But this particular podcast episode was 21 minutes. So I'm not going to show the entire podcast. I'm going to show an 8-minute excerpt, and then I will be back to discuss or elaborate on the topic. So just for purposes of definitions, I'm going to define infrastructure because there's several definitions. So infrastructure is defined as the basic underlying framework or features of a system or an organization. Another definition of infrastructure is the fundamental facilities serving a country, city, or area as transportation and communication systems, power plants, and roads. But for the purpose of this episode, when I say infrastructure, I'm referring to the first definition, the basic underlying framework or features of a system or an organization. So I'm getting ready to show the excerpt, which will talk about this dysfunctional unconscious belief. You don't have to deal with problems. Leave them for someone else to figure out. This is one of the dysfunctional unconscious beliefs that cause people in leadership positions not to update their infrastructure and to expect their staff to work in an environment in which their jobs are much harder because the systems, policies, and procedures are outdated. So I'm going to show the excerpt now, and then I'll be back to elaborate. So let's talk about the dysfunctional unconscious belief that we're going to discuss today, a belief that causes leaders to expect their staff to work in outdated infrastructures. I nicknamed the belief the not my problem, figure it out belief. And that belief is you don't have to deal with problems. Leave them for someone else to figure out. Now, on my podcast, due to the length of it, I only talk about one dysfunctional unconscious belief related to the topic. But when I do my trainings, because I do 3-hour trainings, 1-day trainings, 2-day trainings on all of the topics that are in my podcast, we talk about several dysfunctional unconscious beliefs for each topic. So for this topic that we're talking about today, there's other beliefs, such as you have a right to put unrealistic expectations on people and they have to meet them or else. And the belief people have to figure everything out by themselves. So there's lots of beliefs that cause leaders to expect their staff to work in outdated infrastructure. But this is one of them. You don't have to deal with problems. Leave them for someone else to figure out. This belief is a revenue thief because staff leave because the infrastructure is outdated. This belief also steals from the company in other ways because problems exacerbate that are not being addressed, and problems can be very costly. So people who are afflicted by this belief, they expect individuals to work with outdated systems that make their jobs twice as hard. So here's an example. I'll use a personal example of a company that I had onboarded with and it's not on my resume or LinkedIn or anywhere else. So if I do use an example of a company, I make sure I use the example in a way that's not throwing the company under the bus. Because I'm a consultant, I like to help companies fix problems. But this company, I only stayed 6 weeks, so it's not listed anywhere. But it took 2 months to onboard, and their onboarding system is outdated. And so when I did start, the person who interviewed me had mentioned that they didn't have electronic health records, but I guess I just really didn't pay that any attention. You know, they said we're going to be switching soon and they're like 10 years behind the switch. So I was thinking to myself, well, they're going to switch soon. So I was thinking soon meant soon, but it didn't. When I got on board, I realized they were talking about a year or so later, they were going to make the switch. And I tried, it was several reasons why I left that company after 6 weeks. But one of them was the fact that their record keeping system was so outdated. And I tried to work with it, but I had been using electronic health records for so long. I was so accustomed to them. They were so convenient. Now, for various reasons, they're convenient. And I just couldn't. It was making my job twice as hard. And so I just was not willing to do that, but they still had the expectation that all of your paperwork be done and be done appropriately and turned in by the end of the day or first thing in the morning. And with that outdated system, that meant I had to work some extra hours off, that I wasn't being compensated for simply because they had an outdated system. So I left. That people who are afflicted by this belief, they expect individuals not to discuss the real problems at meetings and keep putting fires out produced by the outdated infrastructure. They pass the buck to subordinate managers and supervisors who pass the buck to frontline staff. So here's these problems that are not being addressed and they get passed from person to person. And so a culture is being created, pass the buck problem, throw people under the bus culture. And so people are not addressing problems. So now the whole company has become infected. I was going to say affected, but it's infected by this belief, hey, you don't have to deal with problems, leave them for someone else to figure out. People afflicted by this belief expect staff to act as support beams for the crumbling infrastructure while keeping up with their job duties. So an example of that would be, let's say the company has grown to the point where they need to update their training department. They need to automate some of their trainings. They need to hire some additional training staff, but they don't. So now they have employees who they're expecting to keep doing their job, keep up with their work, but train new people. But these employees are not being compensated to train new people, and they haven't been trained to train. And so that's an example of that particular behavior. People afflicted by this dysfunctional belief act as if the problems that are being produced by the company's failure to update their policies, practices, and procedures are not their problems. But if you're in leadership, it's your problem. Dr. R. Joseph, a noted expert in the fields of neuroscience and psychology, he says there's a way out. There's a solution for people who've been raised in environments in which these types of dysfunctional beliefs have been programmed into their minds. He says they have to be able to recognize the maladaptive, self-destructive patterns they've been engaging in. It would be very difficult for them to change their behavior if they cannot recognize it so as to avoid it. So let me go back to the belief. So as I said, this belief is unconscious. People who are afflicted by this belief wouldn't walk into a staff meeting and say, hello, I believe I don't have to deal with problems. I'm going to leave them for someone else to figure out. And so they can't stop doing the behaviors associated with that belief if they're not consciously aware that's what they are doing. Dr. Joseph says they also have to become educated about the alternatives that are available. And he's referring to alternative beliefs and alternative behavior. So here's an alternative belief. I call it a more functional belief than the dysfunctional one that we're discussing. There are certain problems that belong to you in your professional life, and it's your job to address them. If you are in a leadership position, the company is at risk if you fail to address problems in a timely manner. Many companies have gone bankrupt because management ignored problems or left the problems for someone to solve who didn't have the authority to solve them. Problems such as staff members not pulling their weight, or outdated infrastructures, or discriminatory practices, or unproductive meetings can negatively impact the bottom line. Use the problem-solving model. Step 1, identify the problem. Step 2, separate the problem from the symptom. Step 3, generate 3 possible solutions. Step 4, pick the best solution. Step 5, implement the solution. Step 6, evaluate if the implemented solution addressed the problem. If not, go back and select one of the other proposed solutions. In the long run, taking time to adequately address problems will save the company time and money. Smart, talented people leave companies that don't address problems in a timely manner. They believe they bring too much to the table to have to work in those types of conditions.
Okay, so now I'm going to talk about some solutions for the behaviors that are associated with the dysfunctional belief. You don't have to deal with problems. You can leave them for someone else to figure out. This is a problem. It is a problem, but it's a dysfunctional belief that causes a lot of leaders to believe they don't have to update their infrastructures. And if you're just joining me for the purposes of this particular episode 27 of the Emancipated Mind Show, I'm defining infrastructure, or I'm using the definition of infrastructure, the basic underlying framework or features of a system or an organization. And the topic today is improving the bottom line by updating infrastructure. So I just showed an excerpt from one of my podcasts where I deconstruct this dysfunctional unconscious belief that causes a lot of companies, organizations, and cities to lose money and staff because they have outdated infrastructures. So in the podcast excerpt, I talked about some of the behaviors associated or produced by this dysfunctional belief. So now I'm going to talk about some solutions. I already in the excerpt showed an alternative belief. So now let's talk about the behaviors that need to change. So for the behavior, the dysfunctional behavior of expecting people to work with outdated systems that make their jobs twice as hard, what's the solution? Fix your system. Your record keeping system, your hiring system, your onboarding system, your training system. You have to fix those. A lot of companies, cities, and organizations have outdated systems. Hire a consultant if necessary. That's not always necessary, but in some cases it is. I remember being at an organization, not the one I talked about in the excerpt, but another company that updated their record keeping system very early in the process when electronic health records became, the new standard. They were one of the first to completely change their record keeping system. And it was a huge organization. They brought a consultant in. He was there for almost a year, going from location to location to location, not only developing the system, but training people how to use it. So in that case, sometimes you have to bring a consultant in. Automate systems that can be automated to improve efficiency. So I worked at another organization, neither of the ones I've talked about so far. I was a clinical director at one particular organization, and I automated some of the trainings because the company or the organization I was working for had grown over the years, and a lot of the trainings that used to be done one-on-one in the past, they were too big, they were too large for that. And so I automated some of the trainings and I made them competency based, meaning that after people watched the recording that broke down the steps of what they needed to do, they had to pass a quiz with a certain percentage point in order to get a certificate. And if they didn't, then they had to retake the quiz or rewatch the training video. Update your forms, contracts, documents, policies, and so forth. For the dysfunctional behavior of expecting people to not discuss the real problems at staff meetings and keep putting fires out that are produced by an outdated infrastructure, here's the solution. Ask people to identify what they believe are the real problems. If you just keep addressing symptoms, then the problems will still manifest. They may manifest in a different way, but unless you address the real problems, you're going to keep having the same results. Invite people to share their ideals about solutions to address the real problems. Make sure you have frontline staff there, because a lot of times you have administration at a table trying to fix some problems and they need input from frontline staff, because sometimes the solutions that administration come up with are not realistic. They're not practical because they are not in touch with the boots on the ground work that is being done. If it will take time to correct the real problems, let people know how long it will take and find ways to help your people during the time it will take to make the changes. Some changes are a process, it takes time. And so just let people know that we're making these changes, and be realistic and be real. Don't promise that changes are happening and they're not actually in motion. And in fact, it might help to bring some of your frontline staff on the implementation committee to help these changes, become a part of the new updated infrastructure. For the dysfunctional behavior of passing the buck to subordinate managers and supervisors who pass the buck to frontline staff, because of this belief here, you don't have to deal with problems, leave them for someone else to figure out. Take responsibility for addressing the problems. Create a culture that celebrates solution-focused thinking. Because there are a lot of companies, organizations, and municipalities that have created unintentionally a culture of criticizing and complaining.
but not seeking solutions. A culture of talking very profoundly about the problems, but taking no actions to change anything. That's some other dysfunctional beliefs in one of my sets of 100 most commonly seen unconscious beliefs. For the dysfunctional behavior of expecting staff to act as support beams for the crumbling infrastructure while keeping up with their job duties. That's an unrealistic expectation. Admit when your infrastructure needs to be updated and don't wait for it to crumble. Reward staff who are helping support the structure while it's being updated. So in the excerpt, I talked about, how important it is to, have, to update your training. Well, maybe I did. Maybe I talked about that after the excerpt. So when I automated some of those trainings for that organization that I was working at, I understood that some of the staff who was having to keep up with their job while being expected to train other people, I understood what they were going through, and I'll let them know, hey, I am automating some of these trainings. This will not be, this, you have an outdate, and in the meantime, if you have to, if your company is in the process of updating a particular system and you have extra work being put on a person, meaning they're being expected to keep up with their job duties and act as support beams for the crumbling structure, reward them. Reward them until for doing this extra work until you're able to update your infrastructure. And a lot of people may say, well, it's not in the budget. It's not in the budget. We don't have the money. It's not in the budget. But they are paying the high cost of turnover. Yeah, people are leaving. People who have unrealistic expectations put on them burn out. And a lot of them leave. They jump ship. So a lot of companies, organizations, and municipalities have these high turnover rates. And they say, well, it's not in the budget to update this policy, this system, this procedure, but they would save money by, if they updated the systems, the policies, the procedures that they're losing because of high staff turnover. So for the dysfunctional behavior of acting as if the problems that are being produced by the companies, organizations, or municipalities' failure to update their policies, practices, and procedures are not their problems. Do your job as a leader. Stop screaming at symptoms and address the root causes. Use the problem-solving model, and I talked about it in the excerpt. And if you missed that, just scroll back to that part of the video where I break down the problem-solving model. People in leadership, they make more money than people who aren't in leadership for a reason. That means that you come to the table and you solve these problems. That's why you get the big bucks and the bonuses, because you're expected to solve problems. And even though I only focused on this one belief today, there are a lot of beliefs in my set of the 100 most commonly seen victim beliefs and the 100 most commonly seen villain beliefs that cause this particular problem that is hurting the bottom line because of outdated infrastructures. One of them is you have a right to put unrealistic expectations on people and they have to meet them or else, because it is an unrealistic expectation to expect people to do twice the amount of work that they're being paid to do, because the systems, the policies, the practices, the procedures are outdated. So that's all for episode 27 of the Emancipated Mind Show. I'm ending this episode. It's a little short. My show is designed to go for 45 minutes, but sometimes it's shorter. And so because I'm pre-recording it, I'm making it shorter. So if you have any questions or comments or would like more information about my work, I'm putting the link to my website in the comment section. I'm going to put the link to my store page. You can purchase my set of 100 most commonly seen victim lies. I call these dysfunctional unconscious beliefs lies. My set of 100 commonly seen victim lies, my set of the 100 most commonly seen villain lies. They are sold with this workbook. You can purchase them on my website. I also have a book entitled What's Really Going On. This is volume 1. I will be releasing volume 2 by the same name later this year. It has 31 cognitive restructuring articles that were originally featured in a bi-weekly column that I had when I wrote for a particular newspaper. I also have the workbook entitled The Adult Reenactment of the Childhood Script. I have a workbook entitled My Unaddressed Issues Make My Budget and My Schedule. Each one of these dysfunctional unconscious beliefs make demands on people's time and on their money. And because I have an MSW and an MBA, I know how to quantify the impact. So this workbook is sold. You can purchase it with these card sets, just like the other workbook, or if you purchase this workbook and the card sets, you can purchase this workbook separately. No need to repurchase the card sets if you already have them. So that's all for this episode. Feel free to join me here next week for the Emancipated Mind Show. Next week, I'll probably go live next week at 7:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm also in the middle of a series, a Facebook Live series that I'm doing on Tuesdays at 12:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And the name of the series is entitled The Lies That Bind and the Keys That Freeze. So if you're interested in that series, I've already did 2 episodes. You can scroll down in the feed and watch episode 1 and episode 2, and I will do episode 3 next Tuesday. So enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you for watching the Emancipated Mind Show. Join me every week live on Facebook and YouTube on Thursdays from 7:00 p.m. to 7:45 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. For more information about my products and services, feel free to visit my website, AnnesiaConsulting.com, or my website, AnnesiaSpeaks.com. I can also be reached via email at afreeman@AnnesiaConsulting.com. I'll see you next week.